Welcome to the Stronger for Business podcast with Divrig Jenkins, Pete Rushmer, and myself, Bev Thorogood. Stronger for Business is a training consortium dedicated to bringing high-quality training solutions to businesses through the combined expertise of our partners. From skills training to developing personal and professional excellence, our mission is to help business owners get the very best from their people at all levels, from boardroom to shop floor. The Stronger for Business podcast is our opportunity to share our knowledge, thoughts and ideas with you, the listener. You'll get to meet some awesome guests from across the business world, sharing their experience of learning and development. If you love what we have to say, make sure you hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you use to consume your podcasts so you don't miss out on future episodes. We'd love to hear from you with your suggestions for discussion topics or ideas for future guests. And if you really love what you hear, please do consider leaving us a 5-star review, as this helps to get the podcast out to a wider audience. Sit back and enjoy the Stronger for Business podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 19 of the Stronger for Business podcast. We hope you're well. As always, I'm joined today by Pete and Bev, and of course, my name is Divrig. And today we have another guest. Today's guest is slightly different to all our other guests. And if you've listened to the shows before, you know that each of those have been quite unique in their own ways. Today, we're joined by Amaan Nadeem, and the topic today is under the heading of Younger Than Google. So way back on the 4th of September 1998, Google was launched, and not many of us really knew much about Google at that time, but since then everybody uses Google every day, and we even in everyday conversation, as we know, wherever we are in the world, if we want to find out something, we Google it. It's an integral part of our lives. But since then, a whole new generation of people have been born and have grown up and are now entering the workplace and the marketplace as well. So Amaan has come in to join us today to talk about what it's like from his perspective and from his generation's perspective, and to talk about the new generation, the generation post-millennial, which is Generation Z. Amaan, welcome to the Stronger for Business podcast.
Hi guys, thank you for having me. I'm sure it's going to be an exciting conversation.
Oh, let's hope so. I think there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of research out there already as Amaan's generation has started to come into the workplace. And what we're going to talk about today is actually what it's like from the perspective of new employees, for people who are typically 18 and slightly above coming into the workplace. Because like every other generation before, we're all slightly different. We've all got different wants, needs and desires, and that impacts the marketplace, but also from an employer's perspective as well. That means different things and different considerations from lots of different angles. So before we do that, I just want to quick check in with Bev and Pete, just to ask how you are and how things have been for you, because it would be weird, if we just didn't talk about that really, really briefly before we start to talk to Amaan properly.
Just so you know, we're here. Yes. Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm good, thank you. Yes, I'm really looking forward to chatting to Amaan. Amaan and I know each other anyway, but being the oldest of the four of us here now today, the gap between myself and Amaan is the greatest. So I'm really interested to get his perspective. My youngest is 25, so he's actually of a different generation again, if you go by the sort of the demarcations of the different generations. So it'll be really interesting to hear what Amaan's got to say. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely, yeah, and yes, I'm here too. Hello, everyone. I am probably closest in age to Amaan, but actually, there's quite a bit of. I already know Amaan. He's already done quite a bit of. He'll tell you about the marketing work that he does, and he's done quite a bit of marketing work for me in the past. He's absolutely fantastic at what he does too. So, yeah, really interested, and it's very good for us to hear a lot more about what you've got to say and his point of view, I suppose, on or worldview of the world at the moment. So looking forward to it.
Cool. Thanks, guys. So, Amaan, it's over to you. So again, probably welcome to the podcast. Thanks for agreeing to take part. We had a quick conversation yesterday. I knew you were a bit concerned that maybe we'd be interrogating you.
But interrogation starts now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not interrogation. So I think what would be good is just to give the listeners an opportunity to learn a little bit about yourself. We had a really good conversation probably about 4 weeks ago when, again, Amaan was supporting me with some work. And in the end, we didn't actually talk about the work at all. We just spoke about our own journeys, if you like, into work and kind of our attitudes. And that's where the idea of bringing Amaan actually came into the podcast, was talking about our similarities, but also some of the differences as well. So I'm going to stop talking now and hand over to Amaan. Tell us a story. What's got you to this stage?
Well, it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. So around the ages of 14, 15, I was quite a troubled, I'd say, child. I didn't really have a focus, especially within school and education. I didn't really have a focus for actually achieving anything. I didn't really want to go to university. Studying, doing further education wasn't really my kind of field. But at the time, my mum's brother had a car garage and in Peterborough, and it really interested me, the sort of the world of work and going out there and actually being independent and earning your own money, etc. So I thought I think I was about 14 years old, and I started working there slowly. I wasn't doing the best of jobs. I didn't go straight into selling Lamborghinis and Ferraris. So I started at the real bottom, and I started doing little odd jobs around, maybe going on sort of test drives with a customer, sort of washing cars here and there, doing a little bit of yard work, like landscape and things along those lines. And then it got to the age of when I was about 16. So I did it like part-time for about a year or so. I think it was probably less, maybe more. I can't remember. And then it got to 16, and it was May 2018, and I was just coming out of school. And because the way the exams work, so you finish your exams and then you, as a year 11, you go have an extended summer. So I finished school around June 2018. I was one of the luckier ones because all my exams were finished. So I went straight into full-time. I went straight into full-time work and worked there full-time. At the time we was moving places, so we was moving locations. So we took on a new site. There was a lot of work to do in like building works along those lines, like yard work, etc. So we done that for about 3 or 4 months. That was really interesting. We managed to have a little bit of fun with things along the lines of forklifts, etc. It was really fun. We broke down walls. So yeah, it was a really good experience. And then from there, I worked at Prestige for about a year. So it's a garage called Prestige Autos. I started off doing, obviously, as I said to you, the building work, and then I went more towards the office work, dealing with parts, etc. So I worked there till April 2019. I then went and worked for a company called Urban Mark. So what they did was, they're based in Peterborough, but they make luxurious cabins and things along those lines. So I worked for them for about 6 to 7 months. Again, it was a really difficult industry to be in. It was very niche. It was very, very complicated. I was the administration manager there. I was doing things I didn't really enjoy. And then I came back, and it was around November time, and I went on holiday with my family. And I was on holiday, and my sister was actually getting her teeth done out on holiday. So from there, I had a lot of time to myself. So I sat and I thought, and I analysed what I was doing in both jobs. I was analysing what I was doing in both jobs really well and what I wasn't doing well. And from what I managed to work out, I was doing a lot of the website updates. I was doing a lot of social media marketing. I was doing a lot of designing things to make sure they look pretty, and things along those lines. So I I then came back and I was sat in my bedroom and I saw a Facebook ad for for Joseph Creative. It was for a level 3 digital marketing apprentice. So I applied for it. I've already done an apprenticeship. So I applied for it, got an interview with Joe, explained to him that I didn't really want to do an apprenticeship, etc. Showed him a few examples of work I've previously done. I went in for a trial shift, which was really, really good. I adapted well with the team, and I fit in nicely. And then Joe offered me a job from there. So yeah, and I think it's about 8 months later, I've not looked back.
Nice, Dove. You're on mute. It's quite nice actually. I'll chat instead. Amaan, that's super interesting, mate. I think Dove was about to jump on the fact that you're not even a millennial or something like that. So yeah, I'll let Dove crack on.
For about the 10th time this call, but
yeah, have I mentioned that already? I think just having the clarity and actually having that time to reflect in a busy world, and having the forethought, if you like, just to think, actually, I'm going to step back from this and think about what it is that I enjoy doing, what I want to do, but importantly, what I don't want to do. I think that's crucial, regardless of your generation or your age or where you are in your career. I think that's really important. I'd like to investigate a little bit more about when you worked for the family firm, the stories that you were telling me previously around the fact that your family weren't handing things to you on a plate. Can you just tell our listeners a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so obviously working for a family business, a lot of people have that sort of what's the word, that sort of grey area around, you get everything handed to you on the plate. You don't have to work for anything. You just get given free money at the end of the day, and it's an easy route for you. But actually, I've found it's actually the opposite of that, because you have to prove to them, because they without, not in a bad way, but they are your biggest they are your biggest sort of critics. So there was always times where I'd have to prove myself. I wasn't given anything on a plate. It was actually the opposite. I had to work and show that I was committed to be able to continue on and actually pursue a job within a secure net within the business.
What's fascinating for me, Amaan, is that I look at you and you're now 18. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I look back to what I was like at 18, and I'll be honest, I was so underconfident. I, like you, didn't want to go to university, almost because where I grew up in Newcastle, at that time, it would have been almost laughable for a girl from my background to have gone to university anyway. So the expectation was never there. But to be honest, I hated school and I didn't want to be there, and I wanted to be out earning a bit of money. But I wouldn't say I had any ambition. I just wanted to go and find a job that gave me enough money to go out with my mates on a Friday night. So I'm fascinated by the fact that you've really got your head switched on. And we've had a conversation before. I know you've bought your first property already, or at least you were in the process of looking to buy a property at the time. Where does that ambition come from? And do you think that ambition is unique to you as an individual, or do you think it is a generational thing?
I can't really say that it's a generational thing. I think it more depends on the individual. I think, without sounding big-headed or anything, but you have to go through certain life experiences to want to have to go on and make something for yourself. So you've got to not have certain things when you was a kid, when you was a child, for example. If you didn't have them things when you was a child, you're going to want to work to make sure you get those things. People around you are always going to have the latest technologies, etc. But you probably aren't as fortunate to have that. So you've got to go on and work to get it for yourself. I think a lot of my drive and ambition does come from a past life where it was a bit rockier and it wasn't as pleasant as it is. And I'm not sat here saying life is perfect in the moment, because it's absolutely not. It may be the same for you guys. You have good days and you have bad days. Everybody does. So I think it's more about your inner drive and how you want to go on and get things that you want, but not being given it on a plate. I was saying to Diefrig earlier, I was saying to him, I recently, I'm looking at different ways of how I can earn money, etc. So I'm looking at, I started doing a lot of gardening work and things along those lines. So I was saying to him, I don't want anyone, because I'm going through, I've recently got engaged about a month ago. So I'm looking at buying my first property. I'm in the process, and obviously, as you can imagine, buying a property isn't a cheap thing to do. So I'm now looking at how can I earn as much money as possible, utilize all of my time. And again, it's one of the things, I know I want to have a house. I know I've previously been in a position where I've not had a house and I've had to live off other ways. So I'm now going on and experiencing life myself and doing it more independently than relying on a parent, for example.
That is incredible.
Yeah, it is. You're very mature, and it's really interesting to hear you talk about being like productivity in the way that you're talking about it, and realizing that by maximizing your opportunity, by making the most of your time to increase your income, to get on the housing ladder, is it's particularly mature, I would say. You know, it's difficult speaking without sounding condescending, I suppose, but I think I can only really, when I do say that, and I don't mean to seem condescending, it is when I compare my 18-year-old self to you, and I think of that I was, you know, you're getting engaged and stuff, and I was out, you know, having fun and chasing girls. And I'm not saying you don't have fun, because I'm sure you do, but I didn't have my head screwed on in the same way. I didn't know really what I wanted. So it's interesting, actually. You're clearly you've got engaged and you're looking to buy a house and what have you. But from a career point of view, what's your, and this may sound like an interview question, I don't mean it to at all, but what is your plan sort of moving forward? Have you got an end goal? Have you got something that you want to achieve in your life?
So I don't know if you can tell by the background, pair of boxing gloves. So I actually box as well. So I box on the side. I've been boxing for a number of years now, and it's just something I've always loved doing. My dad used to force me to do it when I was a lot younger, but I just never really had the interest. When I got to around 12 or 13, I wasn't really the most healthiest kid. And I thought, well, let's go back into boxing and try it. And then it just always stuck from there. So in regards to sort of boxing, I'd like to pursue that into a profession as well and take it as a professional career. In terms of my career, I'm really, really enjoying what I do. I love the marketing world, the digital world. I think it's the way forward for every business, especially because of COVID as well. It's definitely shown to everyone, if you don't have an online front, your business isn't going to be successful. So it's definitely something I'm going to want to pursue for the long haul of my career.
Do you see yourself working for other people, or do you see yourself branching out? I get the feeling there's a real entrepreneur inside.
Eventually, there is going to be a position, a point where I'm going to say to myself that, right, you need to go on, and now you've built up your expertise and your experience, you need to go on and open your own business. I mean, I could open my own business now, but it probably won't be successful, because I have to appreciate that I am still young and I don't have experience how I should to open and manage a business. So at the moment, I'd probably say I'm learning skills. I'm developing on my communication skills, on my people skills, and making myself into that ideal entrepreneur before I go on and venture out on my own.
That's probably quite wise in some respects, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I think is right or wrong, because we'll all have to kind of create our own realities and our own features as well. But you know, there is that balance, I guess, isn't there, between having the motivation and the drive, and that comes from within, but actually having that context as well. Say, well, I don't know how to do that yet, but still having the motivation, the drive to go, actually, but I'm going to learn how to do that because I've got an eye in the future. Again, when I was 18, I'd spent 2 years in college at that point, and I'd had some vocational qualifications, but I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think that's probably true of most people. They end up in roles that when they were even 20 years ago, depending on your age, you think, well, I could never imagine myself doing this. And I think, between Pete, Bev, and myself, we've all had a similar journeys where our career paths have changed as well. Right, I think it's not unique that people at 18 in any generation have had drive, but I think, like you said, in this generation, there's a different context. You guys live in a different context than millennials before, to Gen Y, which Pete's into, Gen X, which Bev and I fall into as well, and then our parents or your grandparents' generation into the baby boomers before that as well. It's really interesting, actually. We were just asking about, is it individual or a generational thing, about the context that you're in. And there's really, really interesting research out there, by the big consultancy firms and lots of other organizations as well, around, each of the generations. But as your generation now starts coming into the market, into the marketplace, into the workplace, as a consumer, but also as an employee or a potential employee as well, there's lots of interesting research already coming out about the differences between Gen Z and Gen Y, the millennial generation. And the reason why I do tend to talk about this as a lot is there are lots of myths and legends around millennial generation, and lots of stereotypes as well. And that's not always that helpful. But I think there's a point of caution for employers and people who work in marketing, people who work in sales, that some people still haven't got their head around the millennial generation and the different wants, needs, and desires. But also as well, that there's you guys coming into the marketplace now, and you've got different needs as well. So, can we talk about for a little while around what your kind of thoughts are around about the generation that's older, not so much the millennials, not so much, but your perspective is a different perspective, like mine was and everybody else's was. What's your perspective on the world of work and kind of tech, digital, and kind of consumerism? How do you see the world from where you're sat?
Well, I've been quite lucky, actually. I'll be completely honest with you. Every job that I've been employed in, I've actually managed to have somebody who I've looked up to as a leader. So somebody as a mentor. So for example, the current job I'm in with Joseph at Joseph Creative, I couldn't find a better manager, and I couldn't find a better somebody who leads me in direction. He's gone on holiday at the moment, so it's been a bit rocky this week to be able to lead myself, and not only lead myself, but for everything to come back on me. And it's made me actually appreciate more. I'm not saying I didn't appreciate him before, but it's now made me appreciate him more, that what he does and how he does manage the business and manage me at the same time. It is, especially being young and a little bit inexperienced, it does help having somebody who can guide you. So I mean, everybody I've dealt with so far, fingers crossed, people are like the lines along you guys. So Pete, example, he was a client of mine previously. Bev, who I know from networking event. Diafrig, who I've just sort of met from the community and stuff, but then we've developed that one-to-one sort of relationship, who's now come on as a client, etc. So it's definitely something that I appreciate a lot, because I've had a lot of good people around me, and fingers crossed I've not had anyone horrible. But myself, especially at the age of sort of 18 and socializing with a lot of people my age, etc., I have noticed that they are afraid in the world of work, because they don't enjoy their job, because they had left school with, well, this is for sort of the people I talk to, they left school without any education, without any GCSEs, and they've sort of got into a job at like the call center, things along those lines, that sort of stereotype. They don't like their manager because they say that he's harsh and he's not a very pleasant person to talk to, or she. They don't like, they're afraid to go to somebody higher. So if there's a mistake, for example, they'll cover it up. If there is something that's on their heart, they don't have no one to talk to. So I think it depends again on the individual. I've been lucky to have such good role models around me for myself within the world of work. So in terms of my perspective, I've really enjoyed it. But I know for people my age, there is a little bit of upset and not so much confidence how I do.
And that's, do you know, you've hit on a really interesting point there, that older managers maybe need to look at their management style, and rather than sort of assume that the next generation coming through are going to be ready to go, they're going to need nurturing. And I think we all do. At every generation we've needed nurturing, and actually I think as leadership is being probably leadership is being more humanized. It's less about managing and more about leading these days. And I think some of the older generations, certainly my generation, there was a much stronger emphasis on managing people when actually I think the younger generations coming through, this is my opinion, I don't have any science behind this, probably need leading more than they need managing. And I think the economy has changed. The type of work available is changing. When I joined the civil service, I quite expected to be in that role for a long time. And as it happened, it was 32 years. I don't think that happens so much now. We talk about the gig economy. There's far more freelancers. There's far more people working for themselves and coming out of school and college and university expecting to go freelance and not be tied to an employer. So I think as managers, older managers, it's incumbent on them to really understand that the entry into the workplace now is not the same as it was when they entered the workplace maybe 20, 30, even sort of 40 years ago. So there is, I'm always a little bit skeptical when people say there's massive differences in the generations. I don't know that there is. I think we all have normal human needs and wants, and they're pretty much standard across the generations. But I think expectations are different, and I think older managers really need to be cognizant of the needs of I was going to say the kids coming through. That's an old age thing, isn't it? Of the younger generations coming through, to work together and not work against each other.
Just to quickly jump in there with what you said, I think us as a generation, I'm talking from sort of my age people, etc. We have been very protected. I'll be quite honest with you. Us as a generation, we have been protected because we have had such a luxurious life. For example, we've had technology, we've never really had a struggle as to, I'm not talking about individuals now, I'm just talking about us as a generation, especially within the United Kingdom. We're so blessed. For example, we have all the technology available to hand, and we have the latest technology all the time. We have high paid jobs as well for our age. Minimum wage has gone up. We've never really had to sort of, especially within the workplace, we haven't really sort of struggled. So there is that element of laziness as well within our generation. So I think we don't need that rough kick up the backside and say, get on with it. We need more, as you said, more leading rather than being managed. So we need somebody to actually say to us, right, this is what you got to do. If you need any help with anything, do it. It's not, here's your list of tasks to do, go and get on with it. If you don't know what to do, go and find out yourself. We don't need, us as a generation, we don't need that. We need more, as you said, humans. We need the less older approach, and we need more, so we need the older generation to understand the youth a little bit more. That's where I'd like somebody like myself to be able to work with like an older management, an older manager, etc. Because I understand their values, but at the same time, I also understand the values of a young person. So being able to do both and then portray, so sort of play two sides against each other, but I'm playing them to make sure that they both benefit from it.
I mean, you talked before that how much you have benefited from having an older mentor. Actually, there's, they talk about reverse mentorship, and I think there's a real place for older workers and particularly older managers to actually be linked up to somebody just coming into the workplace and having that sort of reverse mentorship where it creates a much greater understanding and tolerance when we start to, my dad's favourite saying, you can deal with anything once you know what you're dealing with. Do you remember that from a couple of weeks ago? Mm-hmm. You can't manage something you don't understand. So that sort of reverse mentorship, I think, would be really useful.
Definitely, I agree. I think Pete wanted to quickly say something.
Thank you for joining us on the Stronger for Business podcast. A final thought before
no, you're
we go.
fine. One of the things, I think if you were going to say something about reverse mentoring, I was just going to sort of move things on a little bit. So if you had something to say on that.
I was going to say, again, this
so stay young and join us next Friday for our next episode.
Us as a generation, we know a lot more, without being stereotypical, but us in terms of technology, the latest things, etc., social media, things along those lines. We do have a wider experience compared to the older generation because we've grown up with it, and it's not something that's new to us, because from the age of 10 years old, for example, myself from the age of 10 years old, Snapchat has been around. Instagram has been around. So we are more aware of things along those lines. So we could teach the managers how to use things along those lines as a source of inquiries and bringing in, showing off your brand, etc. But the same way, somebody who's older would be able to say, look, you do this to us. When you're in a sales call, you do this, but you don't do this, because they've done it before and they've got 25, 30 years experience in it, or they've got 20 years experience, so they know how to do it, but they don't have like the 8 years experience in social media like we do, because it's grown up with us. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there is that element of reverse mentoring. Yeah.
Cool. The point I wanted to make was a little bit, I suppose, around the productivity and the tools that I think are very accessible to people in the younger generation, that often in older generations, people may not even be aware of the functionality that exists. The best example I can think of is like a tree surgeon, and you've got an old school tree surgeon who's used to using like a manual saw, and he, you know, a day's work is manually sawing this tree down, and then you've got the young kids turn up with their chainsaws, and it's like, you know, and it's all done. And we still operate in a business world that operates from 9 to 5, and we are seeing a shift now with COVID, and certainly as I've grown up in the workplace, I've got very frustrated around the mindset of time and motion and a job being 9 to 5 and not being outcome based. And I think that actually we've got a very, very productive generation coming up who have got fantastic access to tools and knowledge, where we historically would have gone to university and almost banked knowledge by learning and obviously getting life skills along the way. But actually, are we ever going to draw on that? Whereas we're now seeing people coming in who go, all the knowledge is at my fingertips. It's about how I access it, and then are able to use it. And I think I've always found it quite frustrating when I've looked up at people and gone, this is how you should do it. And whilst there's an element of respect for people who've got experience at doing things, at the same time, I think it's probably a little bit dated and we're just doing it for the sake of it. Do you feel a little bit like that, Amaan? And sort of what do you think to that point of view?
Yeah, I think accessibility is something that I definitely agree with. I'm going to use this as an example because it's something that I always use an example to Joe. This is a black diary. A lot of people my age actually don't use one of these. I'm still quite old fashioned. I use one of these. I will write, if I have an appointment, I will write it in a black diary, but I will also use things along the lines of Outlook and the Outlook calendar. So I'll get an email reminder. iCloud have a very, very good calendar. I'll use that. I'll also use my CRM system as a calendar. So I think being able to use that's an example there, being able to use 3 sources of technology just to remind me I have a meeting. There's no way I'm ever going to forget that meeting. So I think having accessibility to, as you're saying, the touch at our fingertips and being able to use all these products and fastly work our way around these products is something that I agree. And it's moving the world of workplace, because it's going from a pen and paper sort of world to now slowly gone onto digital, to now where, because of coming out of COVID, etc., and with COVID around, it's now everything's gone onto Zoom. If you said to me in February what Zoom, I'd say not sure, don't know, sounds like a game on App Store. But in March, it was the thing I had to use 3 times a day. It was the way I had to conduct business through Joseph Creative. If I want, because my role is heavily based on sales, etc. Whereas I was going out to 3 meetings a day, I'm now being able to have 6 meetings or 7 meetings on a Zoom meeting, because I'm not traveling. I'm not worrying about which location I'm going to. I'm not worrying about this, and being able to be leaving half an hour early, half an hour, and then finishing half an hour late. I'm not having to worry about ironing my clothes and taking things like that, because I can get dressed once thing and then I can wear it throughout the day. Do you see what I mean? So the world is fastly transforming into being on a computer, and technology is definitely evolving, and it's making life more accessible.
I suppose because you're so used to the world of technology, when something new comes at you and you have to learn it quickly, for many people, I think I'm quite unique in that I actually, as an older woman, I quite embrace new technology. I don't mind that. But I think as a generalization, most people of my age group panic if they have to learn something new. I've listened to many trainers talking recently who are absolutely terrified of the idea of taking their training virtually. And I think maybe, you know, there are definitely lessons that we as the older generation can learn from the younger generations, willingness to just embrace and go with the flow, and actually, you know, not be fearful of technology. But I don't know how we make that happen. But I certainly look at, you know, you've been brought up with technology, so the next new round of technology is just, it's an add-on, whereas I think for us it's a wholesale change. What I would love to ask you is, what excites you most about the idea of work, of the rest of your working career? What excites you? Freedom.
Yeah, freedom. You're probably thinking, what do you mean by freedom? I'm not talking about financial freedom. I'm not talking about freedom in terms of somebody's got me tied up in a chain and they're going to let me go. It's the fact of being a younger person and coming into business, being able to pick up so much information so quickly. It's going to help me when I get, so if, say for example, if I carry on working until I'm 20 and set up my own business for 20, I work on it for 10 years and it gets to the point at 10 years where I can completely leave the business and just be director in the background. At the age of 30 years old, I will have freedom. Do you see what I mean? So I think the idea of being able to be so young, learn so much, and to be honest with you, the main reason I was so willing to do with this podcast is because Diaphragm, Peter, and yourself, Bev, you have so much combined. You have so much more years experience in business, a massive amount of experience, and I love to learn of people like yourselves, because then I can implement that into my own daily running of the business and making sure I implement it in my daily lifestyle, etc. So it's then setting me up for a life of freedom, and not have to worry when I get to 30 about, am I going to have to wake up at 9 and go to work at 9 and finish at 5? I'll be able to have that freedom to then develop myself into work on other things, for example, life, and focusing on relationships and family and things along those lines.
Such an entrepreneur in there. So my next question, and I'm not stealing all of the questions here, the flip side to that is, what concerns you or worries you most about the future?
The future is scary. I'll be honest with you. I'm very, very. I'm not. I don't fear the future. I'm not fearful of it. But the world that we live in it's constantly changing. So there is that fear element that what is going to happen next year? What's the next event going to happen? What's the next virus that's going to come around? There's always that sort of fear of, you don't really know the direction the world's going to go in. So I think that's one of the biggest fears.
What's been really interesting about listening to you, and for those of you watching this on YouTube, watching the conversation as well, is I've got this window, this recording open in one window, and I'm looking at some research from McKinsey at the same time. And I think I might have alluded to earlier, you have to be really careful with research, because that can then form stereotypes. And I think, you know, for those of us that work in the world that we do, in a kind of learning and development and talent, and lead people who lead other people, and people who are just generally interested in other people and developing other people, I think we've just got to test those assumptions and that research as well. And I've just been comparing my generation, the research that McKinsey have done against my generation. So typically people born between 1960 and 1979, which just seems like such a long time ago now, compared to people born after 1995. So I'm reading through the list of the context that I was born into, the kind of typical behaviors and how we consume things as well, and like how we live in the world. And it's really interesting, because like the summary and bullet points absolutely sums up the generation that I grew up in. So the context was around capitalism, meritocracy, how one business dominates another business. We kind of grew out of the late 1970s, early 80s kind of Margaret Thatcher era. And it's really interesting reading. It's that very materialistic, competitive, individualistic. It's all about status, brand, luxury items, and things like that. And that's definitely shaped me as an individual, and I'm conscious of that. Whereas on the flip side, Jen said, is And it's all the stuff that we've just spoken about so far in the last 40 odd minutes of this interview. So it's around being digital natives is the term that McKinsey use in this. It's about being unidentified in an ID. So it's quite hard typically to say this is this generation and to put you guys in a box, because it's much different to what it was. And the fact that you go the word they use is communaholic. Let's get it right.
Communaholic.
So, communaholic is the word, yeah. So that's a new one for me. I just found that this morning, and that's around the impression that you guys have got about 5 devices in your hands all the time. Plus, go back to what Pete was saying as well. If you need information, just go out and find it, and you'll find it really, really quickly. And your kind of the way you work is actually a lot speedier because you go, I know where to find that information, and you find it, and then you just apply it. So it's really interesting. Where, especially in our learning and development world, we've created lots of information, because I think historically that's how we've learned. There's a knowledge, a perceived knowledge. We've gone to a library, we've gone to a book, we've gone to somebody who's the expert in something. But that knowledge, some of it, like Bev was saying earlier, it's fundamental truths, because it's human behavior, as an example. But a lot of the context changes as well. So maybe today, from a learning and development perspective, it's around curating data rather than collecting data, because data goes out, information goes out of date. So it's actually, what is already out there and where to get the information from, because we do have, and we should be making the most of the information that's constantly changing out there, which is, what Gen Y and Gen Z tend to do.
It begs a question, doesn't it? How should we still be putting as much emphasis on academic study as we have done? Should we be recruiting on academic qualifications, or should we be recruiting on behaviours and on what's the word I'm looking for, characteristics and personality, rather than because ultimately it's much harder to teach and change behaviour than it is to hand somebody an iPad and tell them to Google a bit of information. So going to, spending 3, maybe 5 years at university absorbing knowledge, if you don't have the behaviours and the life skills to be able to, to put that knowledge into a productive outcome, it does beg the question, doesn't it? Why do we still place so much emphasis on academia?
I'm going to quickly jump in there.
It's your interview. You go for it.
You go for
it. Being so young and coming from school to work, I actually have noticed such a huge difference in what you learn at school isn't what you actually input into the world of work. What you learn in business, for example, at GCSEs is nothing what actual business is. I just feel like within school, there's such a push on, you have to get your GCSEs. Yeah, you have to get your GCSEs. You have to pass your maths, your English, your science, etc. But do you actually use them in the world of work? Does school actually prepare you for the world of work? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think apprenticeships are 100% the way forward. Without a doubt, I feel apprenticeships are the only way to set yourself up for the world of work. If I was to be able to do an apprenticeship at the age of 14 years old, I would have bit somebody's hand off to do it. I think it does prepare you for the world of work, because employees will realize he's only an apprentice, so he doesn't really know a huge amount, but let's teach him. And things along the lines of key skills training group, the apprenticeship service by the government. I think, as I was saying to you, apprenticeships are the way forward for businesses to actually work on younger people and help them come up within business. We are the future of business. I'm sure one day, Bev, you're going to retire, and if you had an employee, you'd probably talk to them and say, look, this is what's happening. Would you want to take over? I'm sure it's the same for all of you guys. We are the future of of the world of business, and we are the future of the world of work, because things will get passed down to us. And especially as Pete was saying, having all the technology at our fingertips and the information at our fingertips, it makes us the most productive generation. That's not off any science. That's my personal opinion, because we are so productive, because we have everything at our fingertips.
I'm quite passionate about this schooling. because I think the whole system's broken, and I'm going to get on my soapbox just for a little minute, because I think the curriculum needs to come up to the 21st century and actually start delivering for young people. And I feel really, really passionately about it. I think that the knowledge is out there and it's readily accessible. There's it's so easily accessible for people, and actually what we're doing is we're churning out young people from school. They've got no idea about the world of work. They've got no understanding, and they're being taught a lot of the time. I'm not saying in all cases, it's a huge generalization before I get shot down, but mostly by career teachers who have gone to school, gone to college, gone to university, left university and gone back into teaching. And actually they've got no idea about industry at all. They've got no idea about business, and they've got no understanding about what's happening in the real world and what shock is going to await 16 to 18-year-olds as they hit apprentices and go into the world of work. So I think there's a huge amount to be done, and I think that schools self-serve. I think they are there to serve their own purposes with regards to marks and grading, and that's being seen at the moment in the government, and the way the grading system has worked, and the way that the teachers have operated, and it's all been set up in a system that is way out of date. And I know I make it sound very easy to make a change, but I'm very, very passionate that it's completely wrong. And if I had all the money in the world, it would be one of the things and the time to be able to make it happen. I'd lobby it and lobby it and lobby it, because I think we're letting people down, and I've got young people that are about to go through that process. And I keep having to tell them, I was interviewing Neville Wright the other day, the owner of Kiddie Care, who came out of school at 14 with zero GCSEs, zero qualifications, and has succeeded in life, but for 14 years got told he was, not very intelligent, because he didn't fit in the system that's there. So
severely dyslexic as well, though, isn't he? Severely dyslexic. Exactly. And we have a system that is very narrow in the way it assesses intelligence. We assess on the ability to retain facts and knowledge, and not on the ability to apply any of that knowledge. And until they kind of come up with a system that allows them to assess children on more than just academic ability, then we're always going to have a broken system. Anyway, we've gone way off tangent.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. To summarize everything that we've just spoken about in this little segment, it's around we kind of measure IQ and not EQ. So it's about the traditional, just like, can you learn stuff quickly and retain that information for an exam? But it's not around people and behaviors and stuff like that. Going back to what you're talking about, Bev, about actually employing people with like a man who've got the right attitude, the right motivation and things like that, but developing that emotional intelligence to help you get on in life generally.
Amaan, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah, it's exactly what Pete said. I'm actually really, really interested in this topic, because I don't think it would actually take a huge amount to change the system, because all they need to do is, they don't need to change the system. They just need to add key benefit points within the system. For example, adding a life skills lesson. So you have to do 3 life skills lessons a week when you're in year 11. A life skill lesson one lesson could teach you, okay, you're going to be working this much hours. This is how you work out what you're going to earn. This is how you work out what you're going to pay in terms of taxes. I never knew that. When the first time I got a wage slip and I saw the tax, and I saw tax on there, and I had to go on question and say, why do I pay this? What is it for? Why do I pay it? It's the same even now when I get wage slips. I have to say to Joe, what's this? Why do I have to pay this? Because it's not because I'm an idiot, and it's because I'm not smart enough to work it out. It's just because I've never seen it before. So it's something new. The same way, if Joe saw a new piece of technology or something, he'd sit down with me and say, what's this do? What does this do? And we work together to work it out. It's the same way, because I've never been taught it, I don't know it. I could go and Google it and find out. But majority of the time, in terms of sort of work, in terms of making sure your pay's right, making sure you're doing that, it all depends on the individual. So Google can't tell you your individual individual thing. So I think adding a lesson like life skills within the educational system is something that I think definitely should be added. For example, teaching somebody how to, okay, you're now at 20, 21, you're now saved up money. How do you go on and proceed to go to get a house? How do you do it? Somebody like myself, I'm quite lucky. I've got, as I said, I've got a lot of lovely people around me in terms of businessmen, etc. My family are businessmen as well. So I'm lucky I've had a good networking around me, but a lot of people my age are not lucky to have what I do. So I think it falls on the responsibility of somebody like myself to talk up for our generation and say, this is what we need to happen.
You know, Matt, I've got a 25-year-old son, and one of the things that I would say I've noticed from him is he's far more self-aware than I was at his age. And listening to you talking, Amaan, I think my generation was all about take. And listening to your McKinsey facts that you were reciting earlier, there was very much a me about that generation. And I don't get that with my son. It's very much more collaborative. It's much more about working together. It's much more about, and just in terms of things like recognizing and accepting other people's mental health issues, that people aren't, you know, we're not, almost like that machismo is moving. It's not expected anymore that you have to, you know, as a man, you have to be stoic and never let your emotions show. I think there's a definite shift in self-awareness and tolerance, which seems at odds with everything that's been going on with the whole sort of racist issue and all of that sort of thing, which I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole today. But there seems to be a paradox that there is this sort of compassion almost that I think the younger generation have for each other that I don't think we had in the same way when I was younger. Would you agree with that?
I can see Pete's brain ticking about this. When you said men's mental health, I can just see his brain just light up, because it's a conversation I've had with him previously, and I know he loves talking about men's mental health. And I think we had the same conversation of I think it was with you about not being afraid to talk up and say your feeling. Well, I think we should categorize it more in terms of generation. The youth's mental health, they are afraid to speak up. Somebody like myself, I don't really have that sort of fear of what anyone thinks of me. So I do confidently speak up. If I have an issue on my chest, I will confidently speak up about it. But a lot of people my age don't. So I think it does help having people like yourself, people like Pete, who are mental health sort of trainers, etc. They do help that within the workplace. And I think it's something that, again, it should be more promoted. It should be promoted more. It should be funded a lot more by the government. I think the government could do a huge amount more and focus their expertise more on things along those lines of the system, helping people within the workplace, apprenticeships, things along those lines, and take their time and actually focus on other things that, as you said, you don't want to go down at the moment. But there does need to, I personally feel there does need to be a shift of attention within the government to help the youth more.
Yeah, that's interesting. So my perspective, not my perspective, that's not the right word. My interpretation is that actually you're much more open to sharing, but I think what I'm hearing from you is, whilst you don't think generationally you're particularly willing to share about your mental health. Have I picked that up right?
Yeah, I think mental health is a bit of a grey area, because some people with mental health, it's more of an individual thing. You've got to be confident and stable within your mind to be able to speak up about it. Because if you're not confident and you're not stable within yourself, you will not speak about it. So, I mean, somebody like myself, I could quite easily sit and say to you, yeah, I have good days, but some days they do be bad. For example, yesterday I was saying to Diefrig, I was meant to get a haircut, but the day went completely the opposite way of how I wanted it to go. I had a breakdown. I wasn't able to do things I do, but I'm not afraid to speak up about it because I'm quite a confident person. But I do know a huge amount of people, I emphasize on the word huge, a huge amount of people who are scared to talk up about their mental health.
That's a shame. That is a shame. That means that my perception is potentially wrong, which is a shame.
I think the reason, I don't want to sort of offend you, but the reason your probably perspective, your sort of point of view is because maybe when you do sort of talk to younger people, they will just say yes to you, just sort of to get you off your back. But when I have a conversation with somebody my age, I can go a little bit more sort of deeper with them, and I can relate to their emotion more because we are the similar age. And I think, again, it was leading to a point where I said earlier, a lot of people do have that fear of talking to things along the lines of their managers, people that are higher up in positions, because they don't get along with them. But if they was to get along with them, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to speak about their mental health and any issues that they're having.
Yeah, really, really interesting, because interesting in my perception as well, based on my children who are younger than mine. But I see them and I see their friends being a lot more confident, a lot more personable, and their social skills be much greater than mine and a lot of people I grew up with. But that is my perception. So it's really interesting that maybe for a lot of people it is a bit of a shield. It's just something that people are putting, again, it's generalizing, they're just putting out there. So people who are older, or regardless of their age, think actually they're really confident and they're really happy, and they're tech savvy and they've got all the things in the world because they don't have to worry about that much. But actually, our perceptions, our reality, but it doesn't mean that it's real.
I'll tell you what is really interesting. I look at my kids when they were younger, and certainly my daughter's 30 now, but when she was a teenager, when her friends met, they'd be all hugs and kisses, and when they put the phone down, love you. And I think, good God, I was never like that with any of my friends. I had probably 3 or 4 really close friends who I could share anything with, but we weren't huggy and kissy. And I wonder sometimes if there's an element of facade about those relationships, and actually bubbling underneath is a much more insecure person than you see in front of us, that actually maybe there's an insecurity in there that's being covered up by this love you and all that sort of thing. I'm going off on a tangent again, and we are coming up to the hour.
We are, and that's a whole nother subject, maybe with a psychologist or psychiatrist, actually, about the whole social and tech world creating challenges for young people as well, around social liking and the perception that if I don't get 100 likes, or if I don't keep up my streak, or whatever it might be, my friends aren't going to like me.
I just want to jump in there and just have a massive rant about it, but I'm going to let you carry on.
Maybe leave that for, well, actually, definitely leave that for another day.
That's actually a good question. How do you know about streaks on Snapchat?
Because my daughter's on it. But interestingly, I'm learning a bit of Italian at the moment on Duolingo, which, if nobody's ever used Duolingo for, this is not sponsored by Duolingo by any chance. But if they want to sponsor this podcast, you're very, very welcome to talk to us. But I'm on a 7-day streak with my Learn Italian, and it becomes addictive, and you don't want to put it down, because if you don't do it, then you get an email to say you haven't done your thing. You learn Italian today. So yeah, it's really interesting.
That's a classic, mate.
It's classic, isn't it?
I left streaks at the age of 14, and you're still continuing streaks, mate. So I got to give it to you. A round of applause to you.
Yeah, maybe I'm the opposite of an early adopter, whatever that is. Okay, right. So it's time to finish the podcast. Pete, thanks as always for being a fundamental part of S4B. Amaan, thank you for joining us today. It's been really, really interesting. And like with all of our guests, we could talk about things for hours. So maybe in the future you could join us again for another podcast. So Amaan, tell us how people can get in touch with you if they want.
So you can get in touch with me via LinkedIn. I'm on all social medias. My LinkedIn is just my name, which is Amaan Nadeem. You can go and check out our website and get some contact details for myself off there, which is www.josephcreative.co.uk. So I'm all available on all social medias and our website, and you can get contact details off there.
Cool. Thank you very much. And we'll put all the details in the podcast notes as well, so people can contact you from there as well. Thank you very much. Just looking forward into next month. So as we go into September, it's the new academic year. We're not going to talk about too much about academia after this podcast. But as we go into September, we're looking at kind of business development and, from a person development, but also from a business development perspective. So join us every Friday in September to learn about driving yourself forward and your business too. So that's it. That's the Stronger for Business podcast. Thanks for listening. Subscribe, download, and tell your friends about us too. Thanks and goodbye.
Thanks very much. Thanks, Amaan.
Thank you.
Cheers, bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Stronger for Business podcast. A final thought before we go. In the words of Henry Ford, anyone who stops learning is old, whether at 20 or 80. Anyone who keeps learning stays young. So, stay young and join us next Friday for our next episode of the Stronger for Business podcast.